Greetings, brethren. My name is Raul Enyedi. I live in Romania, Europe, and I pastor the Sovereign Grace Baptist Assembly of Bocșa, Romania. We have several mission points across the country and a large printing work that many of you support. We publish gospel materials as well as booklets and books on the doctrines of grace and church truth, and we distribute them freely. Our goal is to reach not only Romania and Romanian-speaking people, but also Europe with the truth. We have translated materials into 14 different languages, and we have been printing materials in 5 languages. All our church members are doing everything we can to spread around the gospel and the faith once delivered to the saints. I was really happy when I saw Brother Joe Sider's initiative of this virtual Baptist Bible conference, and I pray that this will be a great blessing for the Lord. My topic today is what the mission field needs most. I want to read a passage from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 35 to 38. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then saith he unto his disciples, Plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. In this image we have a large field of grain that is ripe and ready for harvest. We have few and apparently insufficient workers for the size of the field and the amount of work necessary to bring all the harvest into the storehouse of the owner. And of course, we have the owner of the field. The Lord is using an agrarian image here. He uses such pictures often because that was an agrarian society, and the people could relate to these things. We can think of the parable of the sower or the parable of the wheat and the tares. But the Lord wasn't the only one who did this. Apostle Paul uses the same language, the same image, when he teaches the church in Corinth that one plants the seed and another one waters the seed, but God is the one that makes the increase. And he teaches the same things to the churches in Galatia when he says in chapter 6, he encourages them not to grow weary in their work, for in due season, he says, we shall reap if we faint not. This is the same type of language. So we often encounter this agricultural theme that illustrates the spiritual work that we must do. Let us look again at our text to understand the image and its applications. Let us look at the field. Before us, we have a field that is ready for harvesting. What is the meaning of this field? The field, according to the Lord, in the context, represents the lost people, those crowds of people that he encountered in the cities and the villages through which he was going and to whom he was proclaiming the gospel. Therefore, we can say that the field is the world of lost people. Then we have the workers. They are the servants of the owner. They are sent there by the owner to gather his harvest. The laborers, then, are God's servants that are sent into the world to preach the gospel. The owner of the field is called the Lord of harvest. God is this owner. He is also the beneficiary of the crops of the harvest. The harvest does not belong to the workers, right? Because they are not the owners. Both the workers and the harvest belongs to the owner. He is God that is sovereign over them. So the mission field represents the lost people. It is the place where we work then. It is the object of our work. Some texts speak about plowing our ground, others about sowing or planting the seed, and others about harvesting the crops. All of these texts point to the spiritual work that we must do continually in the world. In our text, the focus is on the last operation of this agrarian cycle, the harvest. The plowing and sowing was already done in their due time, and the wheat grew, and now it became mature and ready to be harvested and brought in the storehouse for the enjoyment of the owner. The field is presented as bringing lots of fruit. The harvest truly is plenteous. It is not scarce, but abundant. And that is a good news for a farmer. That's encouraging news for the owner. However, the picture of our Lord Jesus in the text shows that there is a great and urgent need. And this brings us to the topic today: what the mission field needs most. There is a shortage of something in this image. Let us try to identify exactly this shortage. And let's approach it by observing what the field doesn't lack first. Well, there is no shortage of crops, is there? No, the text actually says the contrary. There is abundance of fruit for those that work. This means that the world is full of lost people. They are everywhere around us. We have a mission field in our own families. We have a mission field in our communities. We have a mission field in the places where we work. We have a mission field even in some churches. There is an abundance of people that need to hear the true gospel and see it illustrated in our lives. Some that we meet are atheists, while others are very religious. Some are obviously immoral sinners, while others seem to be nice people. But they are lost nevertheless. We are surrounded by lost people. The people God brings into our lives, those people, those meetings are not accidental. They represent the patch in that field that the Lord entrusted to us, the patch in which we need to labor. There is no shortage of crops. There is no shortage of opportunities to preach or share the gospel with the people in your life. Secondly, there is no shortage of tools. Now, tools are not mentioned specifically in this text, but the image they had in mind at the harvest time was that of a laborer using his sickle and going into the field, cutting the wheat and bringing it into bundles or sheaves. The Lord of harvest does not send his workers into the field with their bare hands, right? He doesn't leave it to themselves to find whatever tools they can or to improvise whatever tools they want in order to do the harvesting. He equips them with his tools. In his field, you work with his tools. Now, what would be that tool that we need in the mission field? The tool we have, the tool God provided, is the gospel. It is an ever-sharp sickle. It never breaks. It never grows blunt. And it doesn't have an expiration date. There is no need to change it or adapt it to different times or different cultures. The Lord of Harvest provided us with the most efficient tool for our work: the gospel of the grace of God. Some are tempted to change its message or maybe to take away its sharpness. Yes, it is true that the gospel has a rough edge. Such people are not faithful servants of the Lord of Harvest. We have a good tool. We have a universal tool given to us by our God. Be faithful to the message and use it as it was originally given. It is as good now as it was 2,000 years ago. So, there is no shortage of such tools. The workers are fully equipped with the gospel, which is the power of God unto salvation. Thirdly, there is no shortage of jobs either. There is a work that absolutely everyone can do. I was raised in a family of farmers. They lost their land when the communists came into power. They confiscated all our land. But after the revolution, we got our land back. I was a teenager then. And we started working the land again. This land was outside the village of my grandparents. So we had to ride the train to the village and then walk a few miles to this land. We didn't have any mechanized tools. So we had to work hard with hand tools. We used hoes and shovels and forks and scythes in the field work that we needed to do. We were planting several acres of corn and also potato fields. Among the corn rows, we were planting pumpkins to feed our animals and also beans for our own food. So I know a little bit about working the land. Because we were planting other stuff in the corn, we couldn't use herbicides. So we had to manually hoe and weed out the corn patch, the cornfield. In the fall, at harvest time, we woke up very early in the morning, got to the field as early as we could, and started working. Each would pick a row of corn, and we would have a sack where we would put the beans, and then we would throw the corn into corn piles, and then we would put the pumpkins into different piles for later when we put everything in the wagon or in the trailer to bring home. The harvest time was a very hard time. It was hard work for us kids, and not only kids, but that's how we made a living back then, because there was no money available. Our whole family was in this together. Grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, cousins of all ages would come together and help one another. Even though those times were really rough, our family was never closer and more united than then. From the youngest to the oldest, there was a work for everyone according to their own ability. At harvest time, everyone can help with something. Men and women, young or old, there is a work for everyone. It is the same with the going forth of the gospel. There is no shortage of jobs. When all church members are involved in the spreading of the gospel, if they are in one mind and work in harmony toward that goal, the bonds of love and of fellowship will grow deeper between them than ever. God gave us each resources of time, of health, mental and physical abilities, as well as financial resources in various proportions to each one of us. Each and every believer has to put all these different types of resources into the work of spreading the gospel. What can you do specifically, or me? Well, everyone can share the gospel with their acquaintances, right? You can involve yourself in the evangelization activities of the church. Pray for the workers and give toward their support. It's really interesting in 2 Corinthians 9:6, our giving is illustrated in the same language as sowing of the gospel. Paul says there, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. And he's talking about the giving toward the ministry. There is a specific context there. But please don't think that supporting mission works is the only thing you should do. It is true that we need the support of sister churches. The progress of the work depends on the financial support. But I said it before, and I want to emphasize it again. Please do not think that the only thing you need to do is to support foreign missions. You as a believer and as a church must be actively involved in spreading the gospel in your own community. There is plenty of work right there near you. You are surrounded by work. Every one of us is. There is no shortage of space or jobs in the mission field. Everyone can be involved. So, if the mission field does not lack fruit or tools or work opportunities, what is its greatest need? Our Lord tells us in this text that the greatest need is the need for workers, for laborers. It seems that there are insufficient workers to harvest the crops in due time. No matter how much they work, they cannot reach by themselves the entirety of this big field. The field needs more workers. Well, the grain is not harvested by itself, is it? You need workers to do that job. The harvest is a necessary means for the grain that was sown to end up fulfilling its purpose, that is, to be stored in the owner's storehouse. The owner of the field does not plow the land and sow the seed for merely aesthetic purposes, right? He's not pictured as sowing lawn. He sows grain. And his purpose is for the grain that was sown to end up in his storehouse, not to be left on the field. The purpose of God in electing people unto salvation is for all those people to end up in his storehouse, in his home. But election unto salvation is not salvation. Just like the planning to sow a field is not the same thing with having the crops into your storehouse. There are ordained means for this to happen, and the Lord oversees that all these steps are taken in their due time. And the harvest is the final necessary operation to bring the result of the owner's labor into his storehouse. The preaching of the gospel is the ordained means by which the elect unto salvation are saved. Romans 10:14 says, "How then shall they call on him? All those that will call upon his name shall be saved. But how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher?" And this is why, brethren, the going forth of the good news is not an option for us. Apostle Paul says regarding his ministry in 1 Corinthians 9:16, "For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel." So the field needs workers to harvest the crops. This is the greatest need. But what kind of workers do you need for this field? Just any kind would do? No. Does the field need people that will trod under their feet the grain instead of gathering it? No. Does the field need people that think that the sickle is only a tool for communist/political propaganda? No. Or people that don't know how to use the sickle, ending up hurting themselves or others around them? I remember that while I still am pretty good with the hoe and the shovel, I was always terrible with handling the sickle or the scythe. I cut myself badly once. And if you would look at a patch of hayfield that I tried to cut with a scythe, you would definitely think that that field doesn't need me or more guys like me. The mission field needs good laborers. Let us try to look a little bit then at some of the characteristics of such good laborers that the mission field needs. Lord Jesus says in Matthew 9:38, the last verse that we read, "Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest." Pray to him that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. So, a true laborer is one sent by God. He doesn't go by himself. He is sent there by the owner. The Lord established a pattern in the Great Commission, and he authorized his church to publicly proclaim the gospel. Many good people refuse today to subject themselves to the Lord's churches and work under their authority. It is true that all believers, whether members in a true church or not, have the duty to share the good news. It is also true that the public proclamation of the gospel and the entirety of the Great Commission was given to his churches alone. So, the first qualification of a true laborer is that he is sent forth by God. Secondly, a true worker is one obedient to the owner, to the Lord of harvest. The owners oversaw the harvesting and were organizing the workers. If the owner said, you go there and cut that wheat, you had to do it. You couldn't say, I am not sure I like that piece of land. Or, I don't like the workers to my left and right. I would rather go to a different group. Neither could you say, I'll do it but later. Or, I think I'll just do the work that I enjoy the most. You couldn't say that. You had to go wherever the owner sent you. It is God himself now that organizes the mission work. He is the one that equips some to be evangelists, others to be pastors, teachers, and so on. He is the one that equips all his children with different abilities, with different gifts, in order to work together for the harvest to be performed. He bestows gifts, Apostle Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 12, in a sovereign way. And his workers obey him and will perform their duty faithfully. A true worker knows what he is doing. He knows how to use the sickle. Yeah, he's not like me with the sickle. He knows each step, each stage of the work. A true servant of God also knows the gospel well. He identifies himself with the gospel. He knows how and when to use it. He knows what to do with the wheat and how to gather it together into sheaves. He knows and practices all the steps of the Great Commission. A true laborer also understands the urgency of the work. At harvest time, you got to finish harvesting the crops as soon as possible before they are overripe and the wheat falls down, the grain falls down. You lose it then. There is a lot of work to be done and little time. You always are running against the clock. We know that God is sovereign and we know that he will save his elect. There is no losing on his side. But if we don't work, he will raise others to do it. He won't change the means. He won't change the method. The gospel still needs to get out. The gospel still needs to be published and proclaimed. But if we don't work, there won't be any reward for us. The lost people that are saved through hearing the gospel, they won't come to our churches. Many will end up in false churches, and that will seriously affect their whole life and service to God. We have to be busy preaching and sharing the gospel to everyone that we can. There's a verse in Proverbs 10:5. He that gathereth in summer is a wife, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. May the Lord stir each one of us to be wise sons, because it is summertime, brethren. It is harvest time today. The sharing of the gospel must be our top priority. Today is the harvest day. Even during this pandemic that you feel and we feel here, is a means to spread the gospel and point the lost people to the sovereignty of God, who still has everything under control. Every second that we lose, every opportunity that we miss will not return. It is this urgent. It is urgent because we as laborers are few and we're running out of time. We don't know how much longer we'll be here in the mission field before the Lord will call us home. But more importantly, this world is running out of time. The lost people in this world are perishing. And the gospel is the only message that can bring salvation. Faithful laborers understand the urgency of the work. A true worker also loves what he's doing. He loves his work. He prefers doing this than any other job. We all alike. We all like a doctor that really takes interest in our care, shows compassion to us. A good laborer in the mission field must also be moved with compassion for the lost people around him. I've been watching the statistics of this pandemic and how it affects my own country, Romania, and other countries as well. There is suffering and death everywhere. The Italians and the Spanish, the Germans and the French, the British, the Chinese, the Koreans, the Americans, the Romanians, they all suffer alike. The suffering of one is no different than the suffering of another. Everyone is looking for a cure that could heal those infected. And when the cure will be found, it will heal both the Americans as well as the Romanians, because the problem we face is a common one. One of the lessons I learned during this pandemic is to see people not only based on their own nationality. We are all Adam's family. We all suffer alike. We are all affected alike. But this coronavirus is not the only common problem that we as humans have. We have even a greater one. And that is our sinful nature. It affects 100% of the humans. And the casualty rate is 100%. There is no asymptomatic patient, because each and every one of us shows signs of infection. We cannot find any cure for it in and of ourselves, but there is a cure. There is a universal cure, a common one, a one and only cure for our greatest problem, and that cure is Jesus Christ. The gospel preaches the finished work of Jesus Christ. The belief in his sacrifice for us will bring us life and save us from eternal death. We are in the possession of a cure to this universal problem, and that cure is free and available in sufficient stock. This is why we need to be busy spreading the cure, reaching people all over the world with it. Look at the Lord in our text. He was moved with compassion, the evangelist says. And the word there means literally to be moved in the inward parts. It's like that tension that you feel in your stomach when you empathize deeply with someone. We need to be compassionate for the people, that compassionate for the people that are dying in their sins. We need to reach out and point them to the cure. We have to understand the urgency of this, and we also have to show the Lord compassion. Next, a good laborer is determined to work. He is a hard worker. The harvesting time is a busy time when everyone has to work to its maximum ability. After the first day of the harvest, when we would wake up, we didn't have a muscle and a bone in our bodies that didn't hurt. We were still tired and felt like we didn't sleep enough. But we couldn't take a day off, and we couldn't sleep some more. We had to get up and go back to the field. And we did this every day until our crops were in our storehouse. Then we could rest and rejoice. It is the same in the mission field, brethren. We need to be diligent and perseverant in the work, whether morning or evening or during the heat of the day. Do your part faithfully. Do not give up, whether you see immediate results or not. Continue to spread the gospel. That is what the Lord of Harvest wants you to do. This is one of the greatest purposes for which He left you on earth. What does the mission field need most? Good, God-sent laborers. Workers that are diligent, that are determined, that are compassionate, and that are knowledgeable of the gospel. Workers that understand that there is no greater purpose in their lives than laboring in God's field. There is plenty of work, various work that you can do as well. God enabled you, if you are His child, to take active part in the mission field. May each one of us be busy in performing our part faithfully. And may the Lord of Harvest raise more such workers. Amen.